three areas, I think. I now spend a lot of my time doing mergers and acquisitions, helping big marketing services groups, management consultancies buy agencies, and on the sell side, I help agencies exit. So I love doing that. I work for the AAR, which is a management consultancy that is specifically dedicated to marketing services. So we advise brands on how to sort out their marketing ecosystems, find the right agencies, run processes to get those agencies in place. So I enjoy that very much. Would probably be remiss of me not to mention the work that I do with Lord Sugar. So Lord Sugar, for those that don't know, probably people outside the UK, is a British businessman. He's best known for being the host of The Apprentice, which he's been doing. We've just finished filming the 18th series. And I love working with him because to work with such a high-performing, successful business person, you just can't help but learn. And if I was to cheekily add in a fourth, it would be, I guess, finding myself in the position where I'm privileged enough to be able to give something back. And I made a pledge to myself when I started in this new phase of my career to dedicate 20% of my time to giving back. So I've done various things. I sit on the business launch group panel for the Prince's Trust. I mentor for various schools, people like the School of Marketing, School of Communication Arts, and I've been able to work on some exciting charitable projects that have been very rewarding. Most notably, last year worked on a project to build a COVID memorial within St Paul's Cathedral, where we went out and we raised a couple of £1 million and built probably the first major change to St Paul's Cathedral for hundreds of years, which is a memorial where people of all faiths, all denominations can come, reflect, sit back and sadly sort of think about those that they lost during COVID. So being able to do that with my time and use my experience to help others and other great causes is incredibly rewarding, and I guess a big part of what I wanted to achieve in this next stage of my career.
Right. You said earlier that changes even per week, what you do and what you're having interest in at a single time. So how would you put more detail on that? Why every week it changes?
I mean, I don't know whether it's me personally or it's the nature of this type of industry. You get excited by whatever it is you're working on in that moment. I do think I suffer a bit from a short attention span and impatience and wanting to get things done, wanting to do deals. So I often find, like I reflect on my week and it's been fantastic, but the following week I'm sort of ready to go on the next thing. And I think one of the beautiful things about a career in marketing and marketing services is just the absolute diversity of the types of work you do, the types of people you get to work with. So you never have a chance to get bored, really. And that definitely suits my personality type and the way that I operate best. I like to work quickly. I like to get things done. I like to achieve results. And I work best with people who are spontaneous, decisive, quick decision makers, impulsive. So yeah, that's why it kind of changes. And when I was in agency land, I think I was always engrossed in the latest campaign, the latest pitch. And then you move on week by week. I often look back at my diary from the previous month and I think, wow, I did so much this month and I'm already kind of on to the next thing. And I love that. I mean, I think that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. I've never been the sort of person that could work for one company on one thing and a long-term project. Of course, stuff I do isn't just in and out. It spans long periods of time, but there's such a diversity of things always going on. And I think agency life trains you to be a good multitasker. And the people that are best in this career are people that can juggle lots of plates, know when to prioritize things, when the difference between kind of what's urgent versus what's important. It's something that I guess I've had to master over the years. I don't think I've mastered it yet, but I get better and better at it. And I really enjoy that. I think it's a real privilege to find yourself in the middle of so many different businesses, strategic challenges, opportunities. And that's what drives me. That's what I enjoy.
You mentioned mergers and acquisition. Is that the thing that you do only, or you also interact with startups and which are in the initial stages of building the business in the first place? Merging and acquisition comes later on when the business has grown to a good level.
Yeah, I mean, on the mergers and acquisitions side, it's generally I'm working with businesses, selling businesses that are, I guess, upwards from about £1 million in profit through to much higher amounts. We do corporate finance and raising investment, but it's generally probably at the sort of 15-20 million pound plus, so it's not bootstrapped startups. But then I get to work with startups in other areas of my portfolio. Actually the work I do with Lord Sugar, one of the things I do is I take on the winner of The Apprentice every year and help to set up, grow, promote their business and turn them from what effectively that they are reality TV personalities into credible business people. So I get to do that side of things. Working with the Prince's Trust, my role is to listen to young founders who have been through mentorship within the trust for normally 2 or 3 years, up until the point where they develop a business plan. And my job is to sit on the panel and evaluate whether that is a business that is viable, whether it's something that the Prince's Trust should invest in. And I enjoy that. I work best with founders, with people with huge energy and passion, because I can relate to that. And actually, when I was running an agency, we were incredibly fortunate to have huge clients, Coca-Cola, Burger King, some of the biggest brands in the world. Actually, I enjoyed working more with the fast-paced startups, entrepreneurial businesses, where I would be speaking directly with the CEO, the decision maker, and my partner within the business was probably a little bit more patient and was very happy to take the process at a slower pace, working with brand managers, marketing directors. But for me, I've always got my satisfaction from working with the founders of businesses who I think have a unique energy. You could call it almost an obsession with just driving forward and innovating and achieving growth and success.
What would be your primary people that should be connected to you? Either it's people who have grown up the business and they need mergers or acquisition, or they want to sell their business, or maybe make it public, not sure, or people who have startups or want to have startups, they don't even have those yet, or people who are wanting to have raise money, raise funds, or any other criteria. Can you rank them top to bottom?
Now, most of my focus is buying and selling agencies. I think I've found myself in a position where I don't really have the time to get involved hands-on with that many startups. I do sit on the board of half a dozen or so companies, tech companies, marketing companies, as a board advisor, as a non-exec. So when I have the capacity to do that, I enjoy doing that. But I also have an amazing network. And when I stepped back from my company, I realized one of the things I didn't want to do was start another agency and have lots of staff. So in order to do that, what I developed was a network of people that I've worked with over my career, and obviously that network is building all the time. So the best people in advertising, in marketing, in performance, in social, in digital, in content, in influencer, whatever it might be, I can help people find a solution. So sometimes it's just a case of me putting people in touch directly and letting them get on with it. Other times, via my work with AAR, I'll run a more formal process. So it might be a pitch for a piece of business where I'll long list half a dozen potentially suitable agencies and work with a client to find the best one. So it depends. I think with all these things, it's about the size of the prize. And, yeah, sure. If you've got a £5 million budget to find a social media agency, you're going to want to go through some due diligence and a process. If you're spending maybe a couple of £100,000 and you know what you want, it might just be a case of putting a couple of people in touch, having an informal conversation, discussing a brief and making a decision. So, I can help people of all shapes and sizes. And I guess I put my time and energy in the right proportion to how difficult the challenge is. I think the thing I don't have time to do anymore is really get hands-on in the detail, and I just don't have the time as much as I enjoy it. The only way I can operate doing lots of different things at the same time is to outsource and use a network and put people in touch and allow myself to just focus on the areas that I want to concentrate on.
Right, delegate more and scale by that. Okay, I understand. What are the things that, flaws I should say, or the things to take care that you have seen so many times while in acquisitions? People make mistakes in buying a company and selling a company from both sides. While I'm buying a company, I should see and notice few things and take those into account. And while I'm selling my company, I also should be, diligent on those things. What would you say on this?
I think the key thing in the first instance for me is getting under the skin of the motivations of both the buyer and the seller, and they have to align. And, I know from my own personal experience of selling my agency, the things we were looking for. And it's not necessarily just money. Obviously you want to do a good deal, but you want to find the right fit in terms of a partner. And that it might be in terms of achieving almost a form of mentorship, and you've taken a company to a certain level, but you don't know how to take it to the next stage. Or you might know exactly what you want to do, but you don't have the capital to do it. Or you might know what you want to do, but you need to bolt on different services and offerings or different geographies. And the same goes for someone who's buying. They need to make sure that cultural fit and what they're looking for is aligned. Money does come into it, of course it does. And there's different structures of deals, primarily depending if you're selling to a trade organization or private equity. Some routes suit some people, other routes suit other people. Depends on the founder, and some of the founders they've reached an age where they're ready to take it a bit easy and want to retire or to exit. In other cases, they've got plenty of energy, plenty of gas in the tank, and they're looking to elevate themselves to the next level, take their business to a scale which they can't achieve organically. So, the reason I joined the firm that I'm a partner in, PCB, is because it was a very entrepreneurial driven culture. And within that business, it's only a small business, it's boutique. The people that are involved are generally, not all of them, but a lot of them, like myself, have run a business, exited a business, learnt from their own mistakes. And I think it places them in a relatively unique position. There's plenty of people that are incredible corporate bankers. They look great in a pinstripe suit. They know their way around an Excel spreadsheet. They're very good with a calculator, but they don't have that, I'm going to call it, emotional intelligence to get under the skin of the entrepreneur and figure out what's best for them. And, when you sell your company on day one, that's really generally just the beginning of the journey. The big success, the big reward, both financially and in terms of enjoyment and motivation, comes in the journey post that sale. And you need to make sure that everyone is aligned. And if it doesn't work for one side of the party, it's not going to work for the other. Of course, from a buyer's perspective, there's certain things you're going to look out for. You want a strong management team, you want a succession plan. Ideally, you're looking for stable, retained client base, all of these kind of areas. And it's got to be complementary to the business that you want to put it into or to be a part of. So it's so, I'm not going to say complex, but there's so many different factors, and you have to work your way through all of those in a pragmatic way. My view is you want to try to get to those answers relatively quickly, because you can spend a lot of time dancing around handbags and before you get to a financial offer or something like that, and you can potentially waste a lot of time. So I try and develop a process that is almost like a sort of speed dating approach. So you get to the point where a buyer and seller feel aligned in a very quick amount of time. And if not, that's fine, you move on. But if it feels good, then you can get into the process of a deal structure, financial remuneration, what it's all going to look like. And it's a worthwhile exercise.
Okay. Anything about cash discounting, like when you evaluate a business, what methods do you use?
In the marketing services industry, generally it will be a multiple of profit, so a multiple of EBITDA. And it depends on the specialism and the service. So certain areas command higher multiples. It's usually down to supply and demand in high growth, high demand areas. So things like corporate PR, healthcare PR, data, digital transformation, all very hot areas. They command a higher multiple than sometimes more of the general services that are much more abundant. And then the structures of the deals change. Again, that's nuanced between different organizations and often whether it's a trade deal or a private equity deal. But generally the model will be an amount of cash up front on day one, and then some form of earnout period, or in the case of private equity, an exit. And the objective is that, the two parties coming together, the 1 + 1 = 3. And there's a benefit of that acquisition that enables the company to grow at a rate faster than they would be able to grow organically on their own. And therefore they benefit at that point of exit. And that exit time can vary from, I would say, typically in a trade deal, 3 years is roughly the average. In private equity, because often they're executing a buy and build strategy, which takes longer, it might be closer to 5 years, sometimes 7 years. So again, that's something that, a seller needs to consider. Some people are more than happy to stick around and play the long game. Others want to be in and out as quick as possible. So these are all the things you have to figure out.
Right. Many things would be obvious, but any specific things that you have actually seen being overlooked or while acquisitions take place? Any one or two is precise things.
I mean, it's probably not so much overlooked. I think when you're a seller, it's really figuring out what you want and not being distracted by the first offer that comes your way or the biggest paycheck. You have to look at the structure of a deal. You have to interrogate how you're going to benefit from that deal and whether that suits your objectives. You have to get to know the people, and it is quite basic, but am I going to enjoy working with them? And as a founder, you're used to years of doing things on your own, not really reporting into anyone else. And it's quite a big shift in mindset to, you're effectively becoming an employee. And the key to it for any seller and any buyer is to try not to change that dynamic. So if you are a buyer of a company, you want that company to still feel although they might not financially own the business anymore, you want them to feel emotionally like they still own it. So you need to get the balance right of how involved you get and how much freedom you get. Obviously, they're going to be accountable in terms of delivering forecasts and so on and so forth. But how much freedom do you give them to run the business as they have been doing successfully, because that's why they're being bought. So, you have to consider that it's probably not a case of overlooking things. Sometimes people rush through a process and don't consider all these factors enough or quick enough, and then the deal happens, and where it normally goes wrong is a year into a deal where it doesn't feel right. And sometimes with a seller, especially when there's an earn-out mechanism to a deal, if that earn-out is beginning to look unachievable and unrealistic, there's very little motivation for them to keep going. And that's where deals generally can go wrong. And that is sometimes because the targets have been set too ambitiously and unrealistically, and someone's gone into a deal looking at a headline number, being very excited by it, but not quite stopping and thinking, can I do that? Am I going to be able to achieve that level of growth in order to get the financial benefit that sits alongside it? That can happen as well. You sometimes see culture can be destroyed by a company that absorbs another company, and they almost lose the thing that they bought in the first place. So these are, there's lots of different levers. It's not one typical thing that goes wrong, but like any partnership, it's no different to getting married, I guess. You want to figure out the pros and cons in advance and work them through. In my opinion, no one is 100% perfect. There's always going to be flaws, weaknesses, potential issues. You have to figure out, can I deal with that? Am I okay with that? Do the benefits outweigh the negatives? But generally, these processes are pretty well thought through. It's not an overnight transaction. You don't meet someone one day and buy them the next. They take months. It's a lot of work, a lot of commitment from both sides to get it right. So you do have time to think about it, and you need to make sure that you don't get carried away in the excitement of a deal. And I think I see it with a lot of founders. They have the conversation, they see a number put in front of them, and they're online looking at Aston Martins and Ferraris. And once your head's there, you've sold the company regardless of where it goes in terms of negotiations and discussions. You can't do that. You have to keep it slow, be pragmatic, be thoughtful about it, explore all the options, think through the downsides, and only when you're certain it feels right do you transact. And lots of deals do fall down. I used to think I was pretty resilient in the world of agencies. You win and lose on pretty much a daily basis. And I would have, one of my strengths, I think, was I was good at riding that roller coaster of emotions. I never got too high on the highs, never got too low on the lows, just carried on. In this space, the stakes are higher. And I remember the first deal I worked on, it was agreed, and I was over the moon, celebrated, excited, and then it all fell down. And I learned, it hit me pretty hard, but I learned a deal isn't done until it's done. And every deal has the ups and downs and the wobbles and it's all going to go wrong moments. Hopefully you can work through those, and you normally do, but it's not always. You sometimes fall at various different hurdles. You have to pivot, redirect. It's, there's a deal I've been working on. I'm not actually even going to tell you it's going to happen, but it's due to happen in the next few weeks. I've been working on that for 2 years, and it's fallen through twice. I think this time will be different. I really hope it will, but it's built my resilience. I guess it makes it more rewarding when it does happen, but any business person has to learn to fail. And you have to pick yourself up, learn from those mistakes, move on quickly. I know it's a cliche, and you hear lots of people say, don't be scared of failure. I guess in this instance, it's not really failure. It's more that not every deal is going to happen. So it's learning to manage your own expectations, and being able to have the resilience to brush yourself down, pick yourself up, and go again. And I'm building that resilience in this space. I think I'd kind of mastered it in the agency world. In the M&A world, the stakes are higher, the deals are bigger, they take longer, more investment in terms of time and emotion. So I'm building my resilience in that area as well. But I'll always be emotional, because I think if you don't care about the work you do and you don't get affected a bit by not getting something right, even if it's completely outside of your control, you probably shouldn't be in that business. You have to care, but it's not caring to the state where it really affects you and affects your performance and how you operate and your confidence. A bit like a football team, you often see teams that they lose just games and games in a row, and you think, what's going on? And then all of a sudden they get a win, and then they go on a winning streak again. And that's all to do with just mental resilience and positivity and attitude. And I think you can apply that sort of psychology to business. You do have to be quite strong and mentally tough to ride the waves that inevitably come with anything like this.
Right. Could you tell me the number one or the biggest challenge you faced as a board of director?
By
Ever?
sitting on board of directors, of my own company or others?
Any.
I mean, look, when I was running my own agency, I think the biggest challenge we probably had was we'd been going for, I'm going to say, sort of 10 years, and we'd had constant year-on-year growth. We're growing at a really fast pace, scaling up, doing amazing work. And I think with hindsight, we probably pushed ourselves too hard, too fast, burnt ourselves out a little bit, burnt our staff out a little bit. And we didn't fall off a cliff, but we saw the growth start to flatten. And that was quite hard, because I'd almost always assumed that we would just carry on growing. It was like a done thing. Every year we'd do 10, 20, 30% growth. And then one year or one moment in time, it just started to flatten. And that was quite hard. I've never dealt with that. I was running a company that was bigger than anything I'd ever run previously. I'd never experienced it. And in that instance, in all honesty, we just had to dig a little deeper and fight a little harder. And in terms of the people, making them happier and rewarding them in terms of the work, really pushing ourselves to make the creative stronger, better, and in all aspects, just working that little bit harder. And we dug in and we did it. We sort of bounced back into growth, but that was hard because it was something I've never experienced. I think now when I sit on the board and I advise companies, it's slightly different. Actually, the thing I find toughest is when people are very stuck in their ways and they don't listen to advice, and they're resistant to change. And it's that kind of, we've always done it like this, and what you're suggesting won't work. I find that frustrating. And generally, I'm not saying I'm right and they're wrong, but when you're an advisor and you sit on a board, you have the ability to look at things from far away. You're not tied down with the day-to-day and distracted by certain practicalities. So you can think more clearly. You have more of a kind of helicopter type view, and your suggestions aren't always right, but you need to test and you need to try. And if things aren't moving and things aren't working, you can't keep doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results. You have to shift and do something different. So I do get frustrated by people that are so scared of change that they won't try something new. And it's quite common. And I get frustrated by people who say they're going to do something and they don't do it. If you ever ask me to do something, I guarantee you I will do it. And if I don't, for whatever reason, I will keep you informed and let you know why and let you know when. I don't like flaky people. So those are the kind of people that I don't work particularly well with. But I think in life and in business, you attract like-minded people. So not everyone wants to hear open, honest, hard advice, even if it's delivered with kindness. Some people just aren't receptive to it. Others completely welcome it. And I'm not tough as a business person at all. I don't shout at people. But I'm direct. I don't mince my words. And if I don't like something, I won't say that I do, just for an easy life. So the type of people that respond well to constructive feedback and suggestions and criticism, they're the people that I work best with.
Understood. What one thing had worked for you in marketing world that has given you many folds of return on investment, or money or time investment, whatever investment you had put into it?
It's probably the importance of differentiation. In the agency world, there is no shortage of marketing services agencies. I guess the same applies to any business, really. And when myself and my business partner were running the agency, we recognized the importance of being able to have a strong brand and be recognized and standing for something. I don't believe you can be all things to all people. In our case, we felt like, I think in the world of marketing generally, it's not hard to reach people anymore, especially in a digital age. You can press a button and with a bit of spend, you can reach 1 million people in 10 seconds. But actually the challenge is the fight for attention. And just because something is on my Twitter feed, my Instagram feed, on my LinkedIn, in the newspapers, on the news, it doesn't mean that I'm going to sit up and pay attention. You have to create engagement. And when we first started our agency, Frank, we developed an ethos around a word called talkability. And talkability we defined as the buzz that takes over and does your best marketing for you. And we actually trademarked, registered that name as something that our agency could own, not because we were going to sue anyone else that used it, but more from an intellectual perspective. We wanted to take ownership of it. And we developed a process and a methodology for coming up with concepts, strategies, ideas that would generate talkability, and a process to be able to deliver those ideas. And I think that one innovation, if you like, the one ownership of this area, whilst others talk about it, have tried to do it, some of them do it, we were the originators of an agency that creates talkability. And it's still a massive part of the agency today. And it's a big reason why we don't and have never needed to do a lot of proactive new business. It's the agency has a very strong brand. Clients come to us to deliver that type of work. Not every client, because it doesn't suit everyone's needs, but we knew our place. So I think for anyone that is in a services industry, in any brand, you always have to think about how am I going to engage my consumers? How am I going to get them to react in the way I want them to react? And that might not necessarily be a business objective. My view is it should, but it could be changing their perception on something. It could be making them smile. It could be differentiating them. It could be promoting a specific product benefit. It could be driving sales to a website or into a store. But there always has to be a level of engagement. And without it, you're wasting your time. And you can see that now with some of the areas of the marketing services industry that are unable to achieve that with the methodologies that they've been using for years and years. They don't work anymore. So I think for me, I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but it's probably the one thing that we developed that really set us in good stead and set us apart from literally thousands of other agencies doing similar stuff.
Okay. The USP, the unique selling point, or the differentiation. Um, Other than I have read about it a lot. I have heard about it a lot. I have talked about it a lot. I have listened about it a lot. Um, the question is, other than the patents and trademarks, can you really be different at something and that cannot be copied? It's a complex topic, but in a nutshell, briefly, could you say anything? For example, whatever you're doing to be different, the neighboring company could also do it. What would
Sure.
you? How would you stop
It's
it?
a great question. My view would be there's no such thing as a new idea, but you
Mm-hmm.
can put a new twist on a new idea, and you can create ownership of an idea. And if you can do that in a scaled up way and take proper ownership of it, imitation is just a form of flattery. So if I go back to what I was talking about with trademarking and registering the word talkability, we used to see loads of agencies talk about it. But the nice thing was we had consistently driven that point of differentiation for years and years and years. And it was ingrained in people's minds. And we'd often get clients would say, oh, we were just another agency. They use the word talkability. Should we be telling them they need to pay you 50 pence? Or they'd joke about it. But we'd created ownership in a way that whilst others had played around the edges, paraphrased it, talked about the same thing in a different way, we were the ones that consistently did it. And you see that with great agencies, with great brands. They will take ownership of something which isn't necessarily unique, but they've marketed it so successfully and consistently that it becomes difficult for others. And it can be as simple as a color. I mean, look at the Barbie movie that, you can't miss the marketing for that movie. I was reading something this morning that said they spent more on the marketing of the movie than the actual production of the movie. And that is all about the color pink everywhere. Is that pink completely unique? No, there's other brands that are pink, but they've done it at scale and they've done it with consistency and they've done it in a way you immediately know that when you see something in that tone of pink, whatever it might be, that's Barbie. And that's really clever. If you think back to Orange Mobile, they owned the color orange. Were they the only brand to have the color orange? No, they're the only brand that had it in their name, consistently used that as a visual reference. And you see these examples time and time again. So the key is consistency. And I think one of the things I see a lot with brands, when you run a company, whether that's a service or a product orientated business, you love that business and you're obsessive about it and you want to tell the world everything. And one of the things that I will always try and do is get people to narrow it down and focus on the one thing that's going to make a difference. You can then bring them in and tell them about other things that are great, but people don't remember 2 or 3 or 4 things. They remember one thing. And that's really hard when you run, if you're a car company, you want to talk about the design of the car, the performance of the car, the speed, the comfort, the practicality, like numerous things, the emissions. But actually you want to be remembered for one thing, whether that's luxury, whether it's speed, whether it's style, whether it's being a kind of quirky brand. Very, very hard for companies to do that effectively. But the best brands and the best businesses, you will be able to say one thing about them. Doesn't mean you can't say anything else, but you'll know them for one thing. So it's helping businesses focus on what that is and use it as a point of advantage to build the brand.
So it's the normal hard work and making yourself difficult to compete, not impossible. Like I said, other than patents and royalties and trademarks, you cannot just stop anyone doing what you are doing. You can make it
No,
difficult.
but I think for any business, you have to be constantly innovating and moving forward. So, what I found with our agency is people looked at what we were doing, our competitors, and they started to replicate it and copy it. And in my mind, we were still doing it better, but it was less of an edge, less of a point of difference. So we moved on and adapted and evolved, not changed, like it was still the same thing, but the way that we delivered it and executed it, we would constantly shift it up and build on it and evolve it. And it made it hard for our competitors to second guess what we were doing. So they're always one step behind. I think if if you're standing still in any business, you're moving backwards. Always have to be moving forward. It doesn't have to be in giant strides. It can be in small steps, but you have to constantly evolve with your audience, with the market, with demand, with what your competitors are doing. That's really important. I mean, it's one of the exciting things I think about any business. You look at the biggest businesses in the world, they don't stand where they are for long. They're always innovating, and that gives them their edge and keeps them at the top of their game, keeps competitors guessing. And if you don't, others will catch up and eat your lunch because they look at what you did and they just do it better. And before you know it, you're in their rearview mirror. And a successful company can't afford to do that. And that is relevant to any business. It's not specific to any one industry or type of business. It's relevant to anyone.
Which platform or strategy you like most in marketing, like the social media or any specific platform, or email marketing or calling or TV, which is not used so often these days, or billboards or whatever, would you say?
It's not about a platform. It's about a cut through idea, and the best thinking is done channel neutral. Come up with an idea and then figure out how to use the appropriate platforms to deliver that at scale and in the most impactful way. I think where people often go wrong is they think channel first. What's my radio ad going to be? What's my social media strategy going to be? No, you need to figure out what is it you want to say, how are you going to deliver that in a creative way, and then what channels are best to execute that. And that might be any one of the channels you just mentioned, but always idea first. And the best campaigns are fully integrated and actually use multiple channels to achieve different purposes. So you might use social media for reach or for engagement. And even within social media, you might use Twitter to perform your customer services function. You might use Instagram for sales. You might use TikTok to build the personality. You might use Threads to develop a narrative. You might use LinkedIn to do your internal comms. It's so nuanced. But if you start thinking channel first, it takes your creativity down a certain route, which limits it. And, as I said earlier, the challenge is not reaching people. The challenge is to get them to take action, whatever that action might be. And to do that, you have to be able to storytell, get them to resonate with the message, get them to sit up and take notice. And that's the key to it.
Could you share one example that you liked and it worked like wonders?
Not specifically, no, because I think it works for anything. I mean, I could take 1,000 things that work. The principle of it applies to anything. You see it where it goes wrong. You see lots of examples where brands have clearly just thought, what's my TV ad? What's my social media campaign? Best campaign. I mean, again, I'm talking about Barbie just because it's everywhere at the moment and not because I'm a huge Barbie fan. But you look at their marketing strategy, it's all over social media. There's outdoor ads. There's experiential executions. They're using technology. They've used Snapchat filters. They've used AR. They've used VR. They've used celebrity endorsement. They've used creators and influencers. They've used performance marketing. It's so many different channels have been used to bring to life that concept. And that's why it's worked, because actually at the core of it all, they've established what the Barbie brand is all about, what they want people to take out from it, the call to action, which is obviously going to see the movie, They've developed partnerships with loads of different brands that can reach audiences that perhaps were unaware of Barbie, hadn't considered it, had seen it in a different light. They really have used every element of the marketing mix, and they've used social to amplify it, which means that, this morning I went on my social feed, saw this amazing outdoor execution in Dubai, which, yes, thousands of people walk past the Burj Khalifa every day, but millions of people globally have now seen this execution thanks to social media, and no doubt that will translate into broadcast coverage. It will translate into print coverage and be everywhere. The idea came first, not the channel.
A few questions about mentality. What would you put on a billboard if you had an option that the whole world would see it, but you cannot talk about your business, and you cannot use more than 10 words? You can post a picture, but if you want to use words, not more than 10 words, what would you put?
Oh, I can't answer that on the spot. I mean, it's a great question. It is a great question. I mean, my initial gut instinct is something that would develop a bit of intrigue and have a call to action. So whether that was just putting a phone number or an email address or a QR code, but arguing against myself, I also think people can't be that bothered to do that kind of thing. So you'd have to develop a bit of intrigue around why there were these billboards just with a phone number or just with a code or something. And then you do that using different channels, social media, PR. I think advertising only works when it tells a story. So it's a really, I mean, it's a brilliant question, but a really very challenging one to answer on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Successful billboards, when they're used for marketing, don't need to be thousands of locations up and down the country. One billboard, when used correctly, can generate tons of attention. So I'd love to come up with an answer, which I don't know what that answer is, but something that developed that attention, that one billboard, which might get seen by a few thousand people, would actually be delivered to millions of people, because it had something within it that would generate attention. So that could be something controversial. It could be developing intrigue. It could be using celebrity. It could be humanity or some sort of charitable cause. It could be sex and sex sells. It could be deliberately getting that billboard banned. But that's how I think about it. I don't necessarily know the creative answer.
But it can be about your business. You can't sell anything.
Doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it links to your business somehow. It could be putting a URL of a website that's nothing to do with your business but redirects. There's lots of ways that you can do it. The principle I would say,
you can drive traffic or directly or indirectly to the business. That's the condition.
Okay, you're making this extremely difficult. It's a good question. I like it. I'd like to come back to you in a few days' time when I've had a chance to think about it. So, yeah, I mean, maybe you're doing something that teases something, and then you follow it up a few days later with something else.
Just a note again, it cannot be anything related to your business. It cannot be. So you can email me. You can come back. I'll be interested a lot. Anyway,
my creative challenge for the weekend. So I like it. I think it is a great question. So whilst I know the principles of what I'd want to do, I think as much as I'd like to be able to come up with creative concepts on the spot, I can't. So I need to think about it.
I guess it will help you understand yourself more. I think how you think and the mentality, the vision, maybe some hidden things. I don't know.
I mean, actually, when I think about my career and the places I've worked and the stuff that I do, my modus operandi has always been to build it via reputation and let others become aware of it rather than a direct selling mechanism. So, you know, I've only made a handful of new business calls in my entire career. I put my efforts into marketing the business, getting people to become aware of it and let them come to me. So it's not a natural thing to actually advertise myself, a thought process. And in fact, when I started this next sort of stage of my career, the bit I actually found hardest was that it had my name above the door. And I wouldn't say I'm shy, but I'm not a kind of in-your-face salesperson. And I found it difficult. How was I going to make people aware that I exist without actually talking about myself? And the way that I did it really was just to dialogue the stuff I was working on, because I think human behavior is quite simple. If I talk about a campaign that I just executed, I know someone will see it and it will make them think about whether I would be useful for them. And that's a process that I continued over the years to just talk about what I'm up to and hopefully educate and inspire. But I know that a byproduct of that is it generates interest in me and what I'm capable of doing. I found it much easier when I could hide behind my agency, because then I could just talk quite freely about great work. I could credit the people within the agency who actually came up with the concepts or executed the concepts. That for me felt a lot more comfortable. But everyone has their own style. And I think when you're marketing and promoting your business from a personal perspective, personal brand perspective, you have to be true to yourself and do something that's within your comfort zone. And if you're quite happy to video yourself talking into a camera every day, great. But if you're not, don't try and do it. Find another way to do it. And I've, over time, I would say I'm fairly good self-publicist, but I'm not the slickest. It's not beautifully produced. I don't employ anyone to do it. I don't time when I do it for a certain time every day or every week. I just do what feels natural and what comes comfortably to me. And I try and talk as myself so that it comes across authentically. And I also fully appreciate that not everyone's going to relate to that, and it's not going to inspire or be interesting to all people, but that's fine. I'm just being me. As long as I attract the sort of people that would like to work with someone like me, then I've achieved my objective.
Second last question to save your time. What would you advise to your younger self if you had the chance to go back and, you know, when you were in your teenage and you were starting things? And that would also reflect to other people who are in their teenage and they are starting their career and they just want to do what you're doing.
Sure. Another good question. I think there's not so much I'd do differently, to be honest. My dad always used to say to me, you know, work hard when you're young, put the time in, put the effort in, graft. And the quicker you do that and the quicker you achieve, the easier life becomes when you reach a slightly older age. And I don't know whether I listened to his advice or it was just what I would have done anyway, but I've always been a hard worker. I don't believe that anything comes without hard work. And I did put the graft in, and I did achieve things at a relatively young age. And I've never I'm going to be 50 in about 6 months. But at every sort of milestone birthday I've had, whether that's 50, 40, 30, I've never really sort of had a moment where I thought, God, by the time I was 30, I'd have hoped I'd have achieved this. Or by the time I was 40, I would have thought that by now. Never. And I made sacrifices along the way, for sure. You know, it does affect, if you throw everything into your business, you do make sacrifices in terms of the amount of times you see your friends and relationships. And kids and whatever it might be at whatever stage in life you're at. So I'm not sure I've got that much advice that I would give myself. Maybe to have a little bit more self-confidence, not to question myself, not to sort of worry whether, maybe not to push myself so hard, but I'm not even sure I would say that, because that's my personality and that's what drives me. And now when people say to me, you know, what's next? What's your 3-year plan? What's your 5-year plan? My answer is, I just want to get out of bed every morning and be happy. And as long as I'm doing that, I don't question things too much. And I'm not a kind of happy, clappy, unrealistic person. We all have good days, bad days, good weeks, bad days. You know, that is part of life. But overall, if I'm enjoying what I'm doing, then I'm performing at my absolute best, and I'm growing as a person in terms of spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, academically, whatever it might be. So I just carry on. And I think when I was younger, maybe I was a bit more scared of failure. Maybe I'd sort of question, is all this hard work, is it worth it? You know, there was certainly times in my career where my friends were earning a lot more money than I was. And I was like, am I an idiot for choosing this profession, which generally doesn't pay a great deal until you reach a certain level? Should I be leaving the agency I'm at because I've seen my friends leave and get a 5%, 10% pay rise? Am I the mug that's sort of being loyal? You know, there's always these questions. But I've always gone with my gut, not in a irresponsible way. Often, you know, when I made the decision to step back from my agency after 20 years, my gut, it was a process I thought about for about 2 years. My gut on day one of that 2-year period was, this is the right thing to do. But it wasn't something I was just going to do on a whim. I had to let it sort of percolate and sit with me. And when I did it 2 years later, I'm pleased I waited that amount of time, because I did it with absolute certainty. It doesn't mean I wasn't a little bit scared of the unknown, but it wasn't that sort of flippant decision. So yeah, maybe the short answer to your question is, perhaps had a bit more confidence in my own ability and not question whether I was doing the right thing or not. But I don't actually think questioning yourself is a bad thing either. So it's a good question. It's a hard one to answer, but I don't have any regrets. I mean, I'm not saying everything's been perfect, but I've loved the journey I've taken. I feel very, very lucky to be where I am today, working with the people and the brands and the projects I'm working on. Things can always be better, but they can also be a hell of a lot worse. So generally, I'm pretty pleased with how life's working out.
I'll add another question and then come to the last question. How much percentage, it will be hard maybe for you to give a percentage, but how much percentage do you think is your success and wealth influenced by the hard work and the talent and the skills you have, and not with all the other factors that are not related to your education, not related to your skills, not related to your hard work? What would you say on that?
My view is that you need a combination of 3 things to be successful.
Okay.
And they all have to work together. So I think, to begin with, you need an element of talent, because you can work extremely hard, but if you're not good at what you do, you're never really going to get anywhere. So I think in my case, it sounds very big-headed, but I am good at what I do. I know I'm good at what I do. So that's helped.
Okay.
The second factor, I think, is hard work. And you're extremely talented, but if you're lazy and you don't put the effort in, I don't believe you achieve your full potential.
Okay.
And the third element is luck, because I do firmly believe you can be very talented and you can work really hard, but you just don't get that break. And I believe that the harder you work and the more talented you are, the luckier you get. Not through coincidence. I think often luck is about being able to spot opportunities. And sometimes you can be in the right place at the right time, but you need to be able to spot that and capitalize on that, which comes with experience. So, it's always my belief that you need those three factors to be working together to achieve optimum success. And not everyone has that. They might not get the break, they might not have the talent, they might not work hard enough. I think I've certainly always worked hard. I've always worked to self-improve, if that makes sense. I mean, the job I do today is almost unrecognizable from the career I started out in 25 years ago, because of innovations in technology and working practices. But the principles of it are exactly the same, but I'm constantly having to learn and educate myself, whether it be on the impact of artificial intelligence or the latest social media platform that comes out, or changes in media ownership, or whatever it might be. You've got to kind of keep moving forward. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Right. Noted. Last question. What would you want to be asked that I missed? I must have missed many things. Is there anything
you've asked me such difficult questions. You really got my brain going. So I think I'd have liked some easier questions, like what did you have for breakfast, or what are you doing at the weekend? But no, it was really, I enjoyed this because you've asked me some questions that have made me think, which sometimes I don't have to do when I talk about myself. So I don't think you've missed anything.
There's no other topic that you want to be included, or you want audience to know?
No.
Or share? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay,
Good.
that's all from my side, and we'll be having more podcasts. I'll be inviting you, but that depends on the topic, and maybe it would be a group session with other people as well. They might not be in London or UK, other parts of the country, but the topic would be similar. Like it would match with other people, same mentality or something like this.
No problem. And when are you going to release this podcast?
Within a month is our time, because we're having a lot of podcasts, so editing, but it usually gets in 2 weeks, I think. 2 weeks.
Okay.
I'll
Look,
share the link.
once ready, send me a link, and whatever you want me to
Sure, exactly.
promote, then let me know, and I'll put it onto my social channels to create some talkability.
Definitely.
But no, thanks. They're really good questions. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Same here. I enjoyed the insights. Every person is unique, and I got many unique things in your experience through this podcast. So I'm sure the audience will feel the same and much more about your answers.
I hope so. And if I think of a genius answer to your Billboard question, I'll email you and let you know.
Quite practical. They were quite practical. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care. Lovely to meet you. I enjoyed it.
Same
Thank
here.
you very much.
Thank you.
All right. See you soon. Bye.